Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
First and foremost, I offer my deepest condolences to Roberto Ramirez's familia. Your loss is felt within all of our corazones. One could only imagine how heart-wrenching it must have been to bury your son, your brother, your sobrino, your primo at such a young age. We are here to offer any type of support that we can in this unjust death of Robert Ramirez at the hands of the Oxnard Police Department. I'll talk about that in a little more. But first I want to introduce myself to everyone here. My name is Francisco Romero, they call me El Chavo, and I'm a member of Unión del Barrio, which has been organizing for over 15 years against police brutality and injustices against our gente. I'm also here today as a member of the Colectivo Todo, al Pueblo, which for the past 2 years has led various community actions and organizing in defense against the migra, raids, detentions, deportations, police migra collaboration, along with this issue, which is police brutality. Also, as some of you may know or may not, Robert was my student 12 years ago. He was in the first class that I ever taught. I shared with you at the rosary that was held the night before we buried Robert that he was an extremely intelligent young man. He was so advanced for his age in junior high, and he always asked me to give him more challenging work. He came to class late often, and he only lived down the block. The entire class loved him. When he came in and made his daily grand entrance, he always went out of his way to walk around the class and help other students with their work. He would usually help all of the girls especially. With a huge smile on his face, he would come up to me throwing up 2 thumbs up and winking at me because he was able to get one of the girls' numbers. In fact, this is how we all must remember him, I'm sure. He was always smiling, it seemed, all day and all night. He also walked with a flow, with a rhythm, with a strut. It was as if he had music playing in his head, and he danced down the school hallways and down the block in the neighborhood. He was what one would call a cool cat, suave with style. This is how I will always remember him for the rest of my life. In fact, I know that he's smiling amongst and within us all here at this placita tonight, because he is in our hearts and soul, you know? I'm sure you know what I'm saying. Just think for a second and envision Robert with us here, or perhaps make a trip into your mind and play out one of the most fun or happiest times you had with Robert. Maybe he was dancing with you in the backyard boogie, or eating dinner with you, or kicking back at the parque. You can envision that. So, with our left fist in the air, this is what we do. We say rest in power with our left fist in the air. This is our commitment that we will fight for justice for Robert. Robert Ramirez presente. Robert Ramirez. Presente. Robert Ramirez. Presente. Now, I told you I was going to talk a little bit about that, the police brutality. We ain't going to let that one go. So bear with me 2 more minutes. This brings me to the political struggle that we are currently waging to bring those that are responsible for Robert's death. First, I want to let the Oxnard police know, please,
they're really far.
do not come up to us with your smiles and try to shake our hands like everything's fine and dandy. It's not. 7 of your officers on the night of June 23rd responded to a call where Robert needed medical attention, yet you came full force, surrounded him, brutalized him terribly, thereby causing his death. At the order of Police Chief Jerry Williams and their Assistant Chief Scott Whitney, authored and pulled a movida, a dirty move, just this past Tuesday, by releasing the 911 audio of that night. We know clearly that this was done just days before this vigil. tonight to cast a negative image of Robert, rather than face up to the reality of the role that the 7 cops played that arrived on that scene in his wrongful death. You cops have opted to attempt to discredit and dishonor Robert and his familia. You want to paint Robert as just another young Mexicano man that was caught up in drugs and that he was probably just going to die anyways. You cowards came in rough, rugged, and raw that night. Beat down or shoot first, ask questions later. That's how you operate in our barrios. Believe me, I know from personal experience. That is not how the cops operate in the rich neighborhoods. Best believe that would not happen. If the Oxnard police showed up to the Oxnard shores and some rich white kid was going through the same scenario, they would have brought in a trained negotiator to attempt to calm things down and de-escalate the situation. I guarantee you the cops wouldn't even have laid a hand on him.
That's right.
They would have had the paramedics assisting the gabacho on the scene and ensure that he made it to the hospital alive and received the highest quality medical attention and then offer rehabilitation programs. The Oxnard police on that night judged, convicted, and took Robert's life, squeezing the last breath out of him by beating him down to a pulp. We hear that he might have even been handcuffed already, and that Robert screamed for them to stop as the cops proceeded to take cheap shots at him like the cobardes that they are. Robert was denied those privileges afforded to those that have power, that are rich, and their children.
Right.
What we're talking about here tonight is the very fabric, this entire genocidal sistema we live under was woven and soaked with the blood of the indigenous people, the African slaves, and by a culture of violence that established the laws that govern us today and that hire the police that roam our streets. What we're talking about here tonight is privilege, racism, and economic, political, social oppression. And what we mean by this, that the police have the privilege of going back home, which is not here. You better believe that the cops will treat our community differently if they live next door to us. We would know where they live. We would know where they live, and if they even hinted at wanting to brutalize us, we'd go pay them a visit. We're also talking about the privilege of not dealing with the impoverished conditions the majority of our community struggles with, working the lowest paying jobs, having the least funding for education, community recreation programs, and employment opportunities for our youth. Over half of the city budget of Oxnard goes to the Oxnard police.
Right.
So they can put more police on the street to brutalize us, and so they can buy other weapons that they use against us. We guarantee you, you give us, the community, $10 million a year, and we will improve the conditions in our barrios. Don't give us those, but they don't give us those resources. It is controlled by the cops. This city has historically been a white landowner and police-run city, and it still is. Usually, to get elected around here, you have to kneel and kiss the ring of the cops, the power brokers, and their lackeys. So we are here tonight to say, ya basta. We're tired of this systemic, state-sanctioned terror against our gente. We will at minimum demand for an independent investigation into the death of Robert at the hands of the police. We will demand and organize the formation of an independent community-based police review board with the power to fire any cop that unjustly lays their hands or causes harm to our youth, men, and women. We will demand that the killer cops be removed off our streets and demand more resources for our community youth programs. We are also here, finally, to say that we will continue to bring justice to the wrongful death of Robert Ramirez. We need to take actions outside of their permission, actions that will disrupt business as usual and will bring this issue to the forefront pages of the media for the world to see. We may have to organize a huge march and take over the next city council meeting, looking at the council and the chief of police in their face and tell them that we're not backing down. In a recent statement that we published regarding police terror against the community in Anaheim when the cops killed 2 young men about the same age as Robert, in that statement we wrote, the solution to this type of state-sanctioned terror is not to slow down, it's not to calm down, and it's not to go home. The only solution is take it to the streets, to organize our neighborhoods and build the organization and movement capable of fighting on our own terms for our collective interests and for our own defense. Justicia para Roberto Ramirez and all victims of police terror. Que viva la raza. Robert Ramirez. Robert Ramirez.